Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Sorry, I'm dialing in I'm on a business trip right now, dialing in from my hotel. So if you see any blurriness on my screen or any lags, sorry about that. Let me know. So we are, for the next few minutes, going to talk about different Google Maps and Google Earth tools that you can use as part of your stories, your research, really how you can take advantage of the many products we have for making compelling visualizations for your stories. And we have a lot of information to go through. What you'll see here on this first slide, that's my name, and you'll see also an email address that you can use to get in touch with me. If you go back to the previous slide, in case you have any questions, you also have the local Google team there on the ground who can also help you. But just so you know how to get in touch with us. So next slide. The Google News Lab website, if you haven't checked it out, it's a great resource for learning, education, just figuring out what tools are available to you today. So you can feel free to go to this site and you can check the Tools tab, and we have some great Google Maps and Google Earth related tutorials on some of the topics I'm about to talk to you about right now. So always consider this a resource for you to use. Okay, so we have a lot of tools. I am not going to cover all of this. Don't get nervous about this huge list. There's a lot to learn. I'm going to briefly touch on a few of these tools, all free, all available for you to use right now. Over the next few minutes, I just want to give you a taste of some of these and show you a lot of examples of how journalists and media professionals are already using some of these tools today. So let's dive into those. Next slide. So the first one here is we want to first look at Google's tools for building interactive web maps. So things that you can build and then embed on your websites. So next slide. The easiest way to get started with Google Maps is to go to the Google Maps homepage, which hopefully you have seen once or twice and have used in the past. You can go to the homepage and do a search, and then you'll see that there's a menu along the left that you can click on. It's just a little icon in the search bar. If you click on that, opens a side panel with a lot of different options that you can turn on and off. One of those options is the Share and Embed Map option. And what this allows you to do, if you click on that button, next slide, that gives you a pop-up and you can copy and paste the HTML you see there, plug it into your web page, and it just automatically embeds the interactive Google Map that you were just looking at on our site. So this is really easy to do. It's free. It's a popular tool among media today. You know, things are happening fast. You need something visual and some kind of location context for the story you're creating. And this is a nice option to add to your story. So this is a great feature for that. And you can embed the classic Google Map, or what you see here in this this map here is our satellite imagery view. So we have satellites in space taking images of the ground, and we'll talk about that in a second. But if you go to the next slide, you can also embed our Street View imagery. So this is our project to collect images around the world using various cameras And you can also embed the interactive versions of these panoramas for free onto your websites when it works for your stories. So here you can see we have some underwater imagery, which we have developed a special camera that we take to various underwater ecosystems and capture interesting images of wildlife. Just really fascinating kinds of stuff, but all available again for you to use. If you go to the next slide, that's kind of the really, really basic, easy way to use the map. But where it gets really interesting is when you consider our map as a canvas on which you can start drawing on top of it. That's often how you want to use the Google Map. And we have a really easy tool available for you to get started building those custom experiences. It's called Google My Maps, and you can get to it at that URL at the top. And what it allows you to do is add different points and icons onto the map. You can add additional information to it. I'll show you a couple examples. What you're looking at right here is a map from San Francisco, where I live. This is from a local news source there. They built a map of different artist murals and artworks available to explore around the city of San Jose. And it's just a really nice local map that they didn't use any code or any developer knowledge to develop. They create this and they keep it up to date. And it's just a really kind of nice, fun example of how you can really use this tool for lots of stories. If you go to the next slide, if you take that map, once you've created it, you can very easily embed that map onto your web page, onto your website. We just give you this little snippet of code here, copy and paste it. You can change the width and height of that map and then plug that into your web page. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see here, this is what the map looks like embedded on that news agency's website. So you can kind of get a sense of what it looks on their web page. If you go to the next slide, just a couple more examples here for you. This is another My Map created by a newspaper in Argentina. So they had some fires and floods, I believe last year, and they created this map to show where some of the flooding was happening. You can see on the left, for some of the points on the map, they added images. You can add YouTube videos. You can add links to other websites. So you can really create a rich experience very easily, very simply, just using this one tool. No coding required. Next slide. This is another one. I don't know if you all are, if podcasts are popular in Korea. They're very popular here, and I love them myself. And so this is a very popular news podcast from last year called Serial. And it was just about a murder case in the United States. And there was a lot of location information involved in that story. So Vice News created this My Map detailing each of the important locations as part of the story's timeline. And it was just a really nice complement to an audio story where you're trying to keep track of everything. And the map is a really nice interactive way of saying, of trying to follow along with the story. Next slide. This is a recent one out of Poland. So these maps are being used by journalists all over the world. This is about contaminated water sites throughout this area. So they wanted to show, again, where some of that contamination has been happening locally. And you can see there's different icons you can add. I will mention you can add custom icons. So if you have art you created, you can very easily upload these to the map. And that's just a nice option if you want to further customize your data, your information. Next slide. And finally, I just wanted to mention these maps are something you can embed for free on your site. So you create a map, you can put that into your site, and I encourage that versus taking a screenshot of the map and putting that in your website. I think they're meant to be interacted with, and that's the most engaging for your readers, for your users. So, but I also encourage you, if you find some of these maps out there on the web, you can embed those sites into your stories as well as just great reference resources. So this is a map from California. We have a lot of fires, wildfires in California. And this is a local emergency resource that uses my maps, and they keep it up to date and fresh. And so if you were covering this story, you could find this agency's My Map and embed it onto your site, and it'll stay up to date as they update it. And it can be a nice complementary resource to something that you might be covering. So I think just keep that in mind as you find resources out on the web and you're trying to package stories up. I'm going to pause right there. Are there any questions so far? And it's okay if not, I can keep going. All right, I'll keep going. If you go to the next slide, I also will mention that these maps are integrated deeply with Google Drive. If you all are familiar with Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Spreadsheets, we think of Google My Maps as another document type. So you can organize these maps in Google Drive. You can build folders, search for them. You can share the map with a colleague, and you can collaborate on editing these maps. And it's just kind of a nice way to work across teams as you're building these interactive resources for your news packages. Okay, next slide. Oh yes, finally, on the News Lab website, I have to plug it. There is a great tutorial. So I know I'm just kind of scratching the surface here, and there's a lot to learn. We have a great tutorial on the site that sort of highlights some of the key features that might be useful to you. I encourage you to check it out and let us know what you might be building or any questions you might have about it. Okay, next slide. So that's My Maps. Again, still in the family of interactive maps for your website. This is a tool called Fusion Tables, and it is something used by a lot of data journalists around the world and has been for many years. And what it allows you to do is take really big data sets, data that you might have in a spreadsheet, for instance. You can import that into this tool and turn that spreadsheet into an interactive map, a chart, something visual that you can then embed on your website. And it's no coding required, no programming required. The tool does a lot of heavy lifting for you, and it's just a really cool, fun tool to get started with. So if you go to the next slide, I have a couple examples for you. So this is a great example. It's a few years old, but shows the power of the tool. So this is a map created by The Guardian, and let's see, so they had a spreadsheet of all the deaths and injuries during the Iraq War. and this had thousands of rows of information. So the question is always, how do I convey that information to my readers? What am I sharing? And so they took that spreadsheet and brought it into Fusion Tables. For each event in the spreadsheet, there was some location information so that the tool could then take that location data and plot all these points onto the map. So then you've turned that spreadsheet into something really compelling. You can see the density of the points. It's interactive. I think it's a really powerful use of such a tool. And again, this lived right on their website. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see we give you lots of options to share this map. You can share the link to it. You can embed the map directly onto your web page, or you can have the actual raw code for the map itself and further customize it beyond what the tool provides. So you have a lot of different options for sharing, for customization. Next slide. Just another example for you. This one is from the Telegraph last year for the UK elections, sort of trying to predict how each district would vote for the parties. And I mentioned this example because you'll see that instead of just place marks or points on the map, they have different boundary outlines. So they have the different outlines of the districts and the areas around the country, and they colored those according to potential voting patterns. And this is a really nice use case of Fusion Tables and something you can definitely build yourselves within the tool without programming anything. Often a very popular use of this tool. Next slide. So this is another one, and this was out of, I just got this a couple months ago from a newspaper or from a website in Japan. And this is showing, I think, damage sites during, yes, I think you can kind of see some of the text on the map itself. What I liked about it is basically there were points overlaid, but you can also do, you can draw different shapes and overlay different data types onto the map. So you can see the circles are like impact zones, if you will. I'm trying to think of how to describe it. And you could just do kinds of interesting visualizations within this tool. Next slide. And then finally, this is just another one about Airbnb's impact on, again, my city, San Francisco. And you can see they different shades of values for each neighborhood. And again, just another nice example of what you can build with the tool once you get started. Next slide. So those were the easiest tools to get started with. You don't need to be a developer, don't need to be a programmer to get started. But for those of you in the audience who know a bit of HTML and JavaScript, or if you're working with developers who know HTML and JavaScript, we have tools for you to basically take our map and fully customize the experience to exactly the look and feel that you're going for. So if we go to the next slide, these are some of our developer tools. You can access the information at that URL at the top of the slide. But yeah, so basically designing a map to call your own. It's just you have full control. You can change the colors of the map, delete and add features to the map, all types of things. And I have a few examples to share with you. Let's go to the next slide. This is one, the New York Times. They're big users of these tools because they have a very particular aesthetic and idea in mind that they want to create as part of their interactives. So here's one. I want to say this was last year. There were a couple guys who escaped from a prison here. And so they wanted to map the timeline around how these guys escaped and where they went and where did the police search for them. And you'll just doesn't have those classic Google Map colors. So they already started kind of changing it. And then you'll also notice that the features they kept on the map are the road signs, the highway signs, because that's important to the story. So they wanted to get rid of all the other features and just highlight certain key elements of the Google Map to really stress important parts of the story. Next slide. This is another one. I love maps that involve reader participation, readers sharing their knowledge. This is one for the New York City Marathon a couple years ago. A local public website, public radio station website created a map and asked readers, where is your favorite place to watch the New York City Marathon? And readers added their tips to the map, and it was just a really kind of nice interactivity. Very simple map, but I think just a really fun example. So next slide. This one's great. Again, requires a little participation. So a user, this is up in Canada, they can type in their address and see where these historical like oil spills happened in the area and whether their home or their loved one's home was affected by some of the things that have happened in the past. So again, really relevant information, really draws the reader in, all possible when you just play with a little bit of code and can just whip something up like this. Next slide. This is the, let's see, this is the last, or maybe the second to last example. Another reader participation. This is in Sao Paulo, Brazil. You know, what would you improve about your community? And they had readers write in and they plotted on the map what they thought. And it's just another example of involving your readers and your audience. Next slide. Let's see. So this is one after the, so this is after the Nepal earthquake. So I've been showing you two-dimensional maps so far. And this is actually using some of the other data that we collect via Google Maps. So this is our Street View imagery. And what you'll see here is on the left, that is Street View, some Street View that is live on the Google Map that they are using to compare to an image that they created and created custom. And then you could drag between the two to see this just really interactive, compelling before and after image after the Nepal earthquake. So really stunning stuff. And again, you can Google this just to find the example. It's the next slide. Similar to that previous example, this is one, again, from San Francisco. It's a custom 360-degree panorama street view inside a local bookshop that a local newspaper created and used in their story. And we'll talk more about that in a second, but they used our developer tools to create this nice interactive container to add into their story. Next slide. And finally, I just want to add something new that we just launched just for news and media professionals. We just included the, it's basically a grants program. So all of the tools I'm talking to you about are free. But this last set of tools, the developer tools, they're, and then you do have to start paying a little bit of money to access the tools. But just for news media, so whether you're a student or whether you're working at a newspaper, you can apply for this grant and we will give you free usage of these tools. Just specifically the last tool. And this is a new program. You can see the form at that link, and I encourage you to check it out. If you fill out the form, that just goes to me, and then I can send you an email back and help you out. But I'm very excited about it, and I definitely wanted to just let you know that that is available for you today now. All right. So that is all of our, yes, next slide. Thank you. So that is all of our, let's see. So those are all of our interactive maps. And actually, can I stop the presentation here for a second? Sorry. Can we refresh the slides really quick? I added one more slide before we started, and I just want to make it's going to become relevant in 2 minutes, and I want to make sure that the example is still in here. Sorry, I'm causing trouble. I promise it's worth it. It's timely. I really wanted to. Sorry about that. But while they're doing that, so we're going to segue into some Street View specific examples, because I think it's a very rich data set that you guys can really use in a lot of your stories, not even just for visualization, but also for research. If you just want to see what's available, it might help as you're just trying to reference locations. I have a lot of good visualization examples here, but it's just a really kind of, again, it's a rich data set that I think can be used in a lot of different ways. And I have some examples for you right now. Awesome.
So where is the, so we just opened it up.
Yeah, no, that's one. No, go back to the, there's just a Street View. Yeah, just click to the next one and then the one after that. So go to the next one, Street View, and then this one. Yes, and we're good.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. So Street View. So this is our project to collect imagery on the ground around the world. And we do this in a variety of ways. So here you'll see we have the cars that drive around with a camera on top of it. We also have tricycles. We also have tripods that we take indoors to different places like restaurants and airports and stores. Just allows users to visit a location before they might go and visit it. And finally, there we see the backpack, and that's something we call the Street View Trekker. And that really allows us to go places where we can't get the cars or the bicycles. And so that's opened up a whole lot of possibilities for where we can collect cool imagery to then make available in our mapping products. So if we go to the next slide. So there's all types of things we've collected, not just on the streets and neighborhoods. You'll see we also do things like special collections. So on the top left, we went to Brazil for the World Cup last year and also for the Olympics this year, just to update different things around the city, because we knew a lot of people were using this imagery, visiting the city and neighborhoods, and just wanted to get a sense for Rio. On the top right, that is a special collection we did at the top of the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. Super scary if you're afraid of heights. The bottom left, I mentioned we go underwater and collect images. Those are sea lions in the Galapagos. And then the bottom right, which is kind of a crazy visual, that is, we actually gave some special cameras to some of the world's best climbers, and they climbed the side of a famous mountain in Yosemite National Park here in the United States, and you can actually climb the side of the wall with them all the way up to the top. So there's like tons of imagery in Google Maps that could be useful for things you're working on. I mentioned you can embed it into your web page. It's all available for you. If we go to the next slide, there's also, if you didn't know this, you can access historical Street View imagery. So you can go back in time and see what we've collected in the past. This goes back to about 2007 when we started collecting images, but here you'll see this is in New York City. So we can have a lot of different images over time of the construction of the Freedom Tower. And here I just made a really quick GIF that you could, very easily share, on social media or something. But a lot of cool stuff you can see in this imagery over time. Next slide. And here's how the Wall Street Journal used it. They were doing a story about basically changes happening to Brooklyn, New York, and just kind of seeing some of the building constructions and some of the just development that is happening in that area. And they made one of these, those simple before and after HTML sliders that, there's open source code on the web. You can grab that. And then that's really just two, JPEGs, PNGs, just like still images that nothing fancy, just took a screenshot of their browser and then plugged those in there. And I will mention that this is totally okay to do for news media purposes. Just make sure to attribute to Google Street View when you do it. But yeah, so just kind of a nice, simple, but really compelling complement to the development story that they were writing. And the next slide. Yes, this is the new slide that I added just before I started talking. So this is actually an example I saw just an hour ago before joining you all. This is obviously, this is a New York Times example. So obviously the Italian earthquake is a huge story right now. Everyone's kind of covering it in lots of different ways. And so the New York Times chose to use Street View to show that before example. And then you can see, and that's just, again, just a screenshot, nothing interactive about it. But here's the before image of this street. And then on the bottom, you'll see they have the after image taken from various news agency sources that they're getting those images from. And they're just stacked on top of each other. If you go to the New York Times homepage right now, there's a link to it. So you can kind of explore the story yourself just to see how they did it. And they, attributed Google and everything looks good. So again, just a very timely example. And I just wanted to get you thinking outside, just get you thinking about different ways to use some of our maps and our mapping tools and see how some of your peers are using these tools today. Next slide. So that's the Street View we've collected that you are free to use again. But where it also starts to get really interesting is when you can start creating your own Street View imagery, your own custom 360 panoramas. And we've made this much easier over the past year or two. And a lot of newsrooms are starting to experiment with this. This comes up often when we're talking about VR and virtual reality. This is kind of a nice entry point for that as you're thinking about adding more immersive elements to your stories, to the things that you're publishing. So if we go to the next slide. So this is a user created 360-degree panorama that they then shared publicly to Google Maps that I was able to find and see on the map itself. This is the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And you can see that it is attributed to the creator of that image. So they have control over that and they can delete it and take it down anytime they want. You can see that there is also a timestamp on it. So you can see the month and the year that it was collected and published. Next slide. There's lots of different ways to create these images. These are our recommended workflow ways for you to capture these 360 images. We think the best and easiest way to do this is with a dedicated 360-degree camera. So here on the left is the Ricoh Theta S, and that's sort of the lowest price point for the best quality, if I can say it like that. So that's like a really nice entry point, and a lot of newsrooms are just getting one of these devices and then sharing them around, testing them. You can see the price there. And what it has is it's got 2 camera lenses on it, and you basically hold the camera up and click one button, and it captures one 360 image up and down and everywhere around you in one image in one click. So it's really fast, really nice. These are some other options. The middle camera, it's a higher price point, but that's because it has more lenses on it. So it has more pixels in the image. It's higher resolution, but it is more expensive. And the Ricoh Theta is pretty good for the price. And then finally, you can use your own like DSLR camera that you might have. It's just a little more manual to create the images using that camera. So if we go to the next slide. So once you've created these images, and again, I should mention that all the stuff that we're sharing with you, we have resources, tutorials, links for you. We can get all this information to you and talk you through how to use this stuff. So don't worry if you're furiously scribbling notes. Once you've created your 360 image, so what do you do with it then? So there's a couple ways to publish and share these images. I'm going to share 2 methods with you. The first is the quick and easy method, and both have their pros and cons. So the first method is you capture the image and you share that image to Google Maps, which you can do through our tools. Again, we have some links for you to kind of get started. Once you've shared that to Google Maps, you can go to the Google Maps homepage, and then you'll go again into that menu bar, and then you'll see a Your Contributions section. And that opens up a little profile. Click on Photos, and then you'll see all of your 360 images living in this area, so that when you click on one of those images, next slide, it takes you into that image just in regular Street View. Just looks like any other Street View panel. And you'll see there's an option at the top left to share and embed that image. So you can grab that little snippet of HTML and plug it into your web page or your app that you're developing. Super, super simple. I think I have an example of this if you go to the next slide. Yes, so this is the CBC in Canada. They have been experimenting with these images, and they did that kind of easy route, plug and play. They took the image, shared it to Google Maps, and then took the little code we give you, super easy, and plugged it into their web page, and this is kind of what it looked like. You can stay on this slide because I don't have a slide for this. But the other option is to use our developer tools that I had mentioned to you previously. If you remember that example I showed with the New York Times, that before and after Nepal earthquake, also the local bookstore. Each of those are custom panoramas that they created just using a little bit of code that we give you on our developer websites, and you can have full control over the presentation of that 360 image, how a user interacts with it. You don't have to share it with Google Maps, but it does require a little bit of code, a little bit of programming. Nothing too crazy, but there's like a couple methods, again, for sharing and publishing these images. I didn't want to get too detailed today, but as you experiment with this stuff, keep in touch with us, keep in touch with the local team there. We're happy to talk you through different possibilities because really early on for these tools. And would love to hear your feedback through, what your workflow and how we can help you, publish some of this great immersive content. Okay, so the last tool I'm going to share with you today, let's see here. So this is Google Earth. So I hope some of you in the room have used Google Earth before. It's one of my favorites. And if we go to the next slide, Google Earth is, it's different from Google Maps. It's its own product. And what it does is it gives you, it's our attempt at building the world in 3D on a 3D map. So you can get a really rich experience as you visit this product. And I think it's great for storytellers and something that if you're not using already, I encourage you to check out and see how you can start using it in your stories. Some of the things you can access in this tool, on the left you'll see is our 3D imagery, and that is New York City downtown. Just like very high detailed, high resolution, comprehensive maps that we're building in many just sort of major metropolitan areas around the world. For instance, we did a lot of updates to the Rio de Janeiro map for the Olympics, and with that really beautiful, clear, high resolution 3D imagery. So you can go check it out in the product today. On the top right, that is aerial imagery. So that's imagery collected by airplanes. And that is actually one of the World Cup venues. So just like very high resolution imagery that you can see. And then the bottom right is our terrain imagery. So you can fly to different mountains and landscapes to have that very compelling 3D view. All great, I think, when you're thinking of stories and you want to kind of build something dynamic and compelling. I think there's a lot of great data in here that can really complement some of the location questions you're trying to answer in your story. So next slide. So as we start looking at some of the data and features of Google Earth, I like to just mention that if you have no visual for your story, Google Earth is a great place to go to get that visual. The example I like to share is a couple years ago, there was the hostage crisis in the middle of the Algerian desert, and there was no news helicopter in the area. So lots of news websites and television broadcasters were turning to Google Earth to help tell this location story. So if you go to the next slide, it was used in all types of ways. So on the top left and the bottom left, it was used across NBC and CNN, again, just to provide that visual where is the story happening in the world. In the top right, The Guardian took the Google Earth map and added their own labels and fonts, probably with something like Adobe Illustrator. And again, that's totally cool to do. Think of our map like a canvas on which you can annotate and add a bunch of your own custom information. Next slide. But when you opened Google Earth while that story was breaking, we didn't have fresh satellite imagery of that area. So to take a step back, Google Earth is composed of all these different images provided by satellite imagery companies who have satellites floating around in space, and they send us those images and we create this map. So in this case, we had images from several years previous to this event. So we called up one of the providers we work with, and they sent us fresh imagery to use for this particular event. And you'll see there's a link at the top of this slide that takes you to a mailing list that you can sign up for, that through which we send fresh satellite imagery around major events that are happening around the world that you can then use in your stories. And the reason we have this mailing list is, one, we know you guys are looking for this imagery to use in your coverage, but two, it takes a few weeks for us to update the map with these new images. So we want to get them to you fast and as soon as possible. So we send them through the mailing list, and you get an email to your inbox with an image gallery of images you can download for use. And if you go to the next slide, we also send you the imagery file so that you can take that file and open it in Google Earth. This is the Google Earth product here. This is imagery of MH17 plane crash. And you could zoom in on the imagery and look around and explore what you can see in the imagery. This was captured the day after the crash, so you could see different things in the imagery. So these are the different formats we send this stuff to you for use. Next slide. This is how the New York Times took that plane crash imagery and just created a simple infographic for the web and for the newspaper. Next slide. This is after the Nepal earthquake. We got dozens upon dozens of scenes of fresh satellite imagery of the damage on the ground, and we sent that to the mailing list so that you could explore and see what imagery might be of use for you to use in your stories. The next slide, please. So here you'll see again that little slider before and after. This is just what the Boston Globe did with some of that Nepal earthquake imagery. Next slide. So here is a before and after. So here's the before. If you click after, this is if you click the next slide, I think it'll animate. So those are the before and after images of the explosion last year in China. And this is captured actually by a satellite company called Terabella that Google owns. And we acquired them about 2 years ago. So we do own an imaging company capturing images from space. And this just happens to be one of the images they captured that was particularly newsworthy and topical relevant. So we sent this image to the mailing list so that anyone signed up for it could use it in their coverage. Next slide. So these are some more before and afters for you. This is from the dam burst in Brazil last November. So if you click next, it should pull up the after image. So that was the before, and this is the after And again, an image that we sent through to the mailing list. We sent a gallery of before and after images for you, again, that you could download and just plug in if you happen to be writing about this event. If you go to the next slide, I think I have another example of another scene. So this is where the dam burst kind of traveled out to the ocean. So if you click the next one, you'll see how it spread through the ocean and just sort of the extent of this. And we're actually coming up on the anniversary of this. So if you go to that link for the mailing list, you can find these images that we collected a year ago still available. It's just a Google group, and you can see the whole history of links and images we've sent through. And you could use this for the anniversary that's coming up in November. Next slide. And this is one, so I mentioned that we updated our maps for the Olympics. So we actually created this GIF. We just thought it'd be something fun to send around of all the different satellite imagery scenes of the growth of the Olympic Park in Rio. You can see the dates there, and you could download this and share it. I think we might have also sent the images along. If you go to the group, if you go to the link for the mailing list, you'll see it there as the last note we sent through, just assets you could use for your Olympics coverage. Next slide. So finally, I mentioned that 3D imagery we create. Anyway, this is just some more examples of how it's used. That's Paris on the right, and then the Vatican City on the left. And that's just kind of how the Washington Post used it in an infographic in the newspaper and online. And it's just kind of a nice example of how to use it. The 3D imagery itself, though, is very rich and can be used in a lot of different ways. Next slide. Really quickly, I want to mention two features of Google Earth I want to particularly point out. One is the ability to export high-resolution images. So take advantage of that. If you are creating infographics, that's the feature you'll really want to use, and what is being used in a lot of the examples I just showed you. Next slide. The other feature is the ability to create movies in Google Earth. So you can zoom into a location and then export that animation as a high definition movie file. And this is how a lot of video and broadcast journalists use Google Earth today. It is totally free and cool with us to use it like this. There's so many cool uses of these Google Earth movies. I couldn't possibly begin to name them all, but a lot of people take that movie and then use something like Adobe After Effects or another program to overlay different graphics and annotations. And there's a lot of cool stuff, again, that you could really use it for, and we could spend a whole day on just creating these movies in a workshop, and maybe that's our next session together is making movies in Google Earth. Next slide. Let's skip this slide. And I do want to mention that the News Lab website has a great tutorial for how to get started building these movies, and it's really, really good. It takes about 15 minutes to kind of read through, so I encourage you to check that out. A lot of good information just in that one tutorial, and if you have any questions, to send it along to us. And next slide. One note, as you're looking to download Google Earth, it's actually a software application you download and install on your machines. We recently made Google Earth free and available to lots of folks, so you want to make sure that you're downloading the Pro version. And it's just a simple Google search, and you can download that for free and install it. But let us know if you have any issues accessing it. Next slide. So those were all the tools I wanted to talk about, at least just for today. I want to share with you a couple resources that I, again, think you would find useful in your work and as you're learning about a lot of this stuff. So next slide. The first is that mailing list I mentioned, where we sent through new Olympics-related imagery, the Brazil dam burst imagery, just lots of different things. I mentioned the Italian earthquake. I showed you the New York Times example. We're trying to get fresh imagery from our providers of that earthquake, which we're going to send through this mailing list, and hopefully we get some of that fresh imagery over the next day or two. So that's one reason to sign up for it, and hopefully we're able to get some stuff that you can use if you find it useful. So you just need a Google account to sign up, and you can go to that link, and hopefully you'll join us and check out some of the resources there. The next slide. So in addition to the NewsLab website, I built this little site. It's all about Google Maps, Google Earth, Google Street View, and all of the tools I mentioned today, including our developer grants program, Street View, like stuff, all this good stuff is on the site. I keep it up to date. I just made some updates to it the other week. All fresh stuff, like if you're trying to get started with 360 photos, I think it's a nice resource. It's public, share it around, refer to it whenever you need to, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. But it's meant for you and as an educational resource. And I think the second to last slide, next slide. Finally, permissions and licensing. I get a lot of questions around this. Your best resource is google.com/permissions. There's a big FAQ there. I will say it's free to use our mapping tools, and we encourage you to use it in your news stories, in your coverage of different events. We just ask that you always attribute to Google and any data provider we might have used to create that map. So what does that mean? If you create a My Map or a Fusion Tables map and embed it onto your website, no permission necessary. It's all baked into the map. You don't need to email me to ask for permission. If you use some of that satellite imagery that we send through the mailing list, we just ask that you, in a caption or somewhere with the imagery, reference Google, and oftentimes it is a provider that we use like Digital Globe or other names. They just like to be mentioned in a caption and referenced because they did capture the image. So that's all we ask. You don't have to, again, ask permission or pay for it or anything. So that's basically the bottom line. And then there is a broadcast license that's just for anyone working on TV, using our maps in a television broadcast medium. And if that's something that you're looking to do, you just go to that website. We have some instructions for you there. So very simple, also free. We tried to simplify it for you. Next slide. Next and last slide. So this is the last one, just the resources I mentioned, just to make sure that you all have a copy of our email and the links I shared with you, all the resources. And please be in touch if you end up using any of the tools. We love examples, as you could see. I and many of my colleagues go around to different journalists around the world and share examples and best practices, and we'd love to know what you're up to so that we can continue sharing that with folks around the world. So